I'm here with Mr. David Carr, expert in the history of Allegany State Park skiing, and we're at the Bova Ski Slopes, which there used to be 3, and I'm going to let Mr. Carr take it away here. So, Mr. Carr, you used to ski these?
Yes, we used to come up here skiing, and to pack the hill, all the guys that would come up, we'd ride the toe to the top, the rope toe to the top, then we'd sidestep down, and that was the way we packed the hill. And for doing that, we'd get to ski for nothing, which really wasn't much then. It was only 50 cents a day, I do believe. But going back into the 30s, when they first started this, I think it was in the late 30s, it was a rope tow, and it was on the left side of the hill. And it was a little Model A engine, and after you got 6 or 8 people on it, if you got more than that, it would stall. So the next year, they put in a big truck, an 8-cylinder truck engine, and that one worked a lot better. And it was still on that same side. And then a few years later, but it was still a rope tow, and you could wear out a pair of heavy pigskin gloves or mittens because the rope dragging on the ground got wet and it twisted. You wear your gloves out because you couldn't hang on to it. Then they got an electric motor, and that was mounted at the top on the right-hand side, which worked a lot better. It got you to the top of the hill much quicker, but you still had the rope that was twisting and wearing out your mittens. And somebody developed what they call it a ski toe grip, and it was on a hinge with a handle on it. And when you'd get on and get going, you'd flop that over the rope and hang on to the handle, and then you wouldn't slide around. Now the worst thing at that time were runaway skis, because there were no safety bindings, no runaway straps, and if you fell and your ski came off, it came roaring down the hill, and there was some bad accidents with those.
And that electric motor was in a shack right up here, and the remnants of the shack are still there and are part of the motor, if I'm not mistaken.
Could be.
And this rope tow that you speak of was wound around old steel wheels.
Yes.
And you can see in that over there where the original motor was. And they over there too. Yeah, they use telephone poles, I guess, on steel wheels. So this was not an engineered project by any means, but it was it was put together by some people that had some ingenuity, no doubt.
Yeah, there were, then they had a warm-up shack down here at the bottom, and I'm trying to think of the guy's name that had it first, but he had to park his car down in the parking lot and carry everything up to it. So the guys would get together and they'd go down and carry up his jugs of hot chocolate and his hamburgers and his hot dogs and his ketchup and whatever. And for that, he'd give everybody a hot dog and a hot chocolate if they wanted it. And then when he left, Charlie Dock took it over, and it was the same way. But that's basically all they had were hot dogs and hamburgers. Not like today's warming huts.
Charlie Dock had Dock's Red House Inn at the entrance of Red House side.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did.
And his descendant, or son or grandson, has Singers, is it? In a little small town, a little south of Bradford, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's a name that's goes way back in time with the park as well. You recall that there was a group camp down across the way at some time. There's an old bar gate over there still, but the foundations are still there. But
well, there was an old big house set over just to the left as you're looking down in the parking lot, and a guy from a man from Buffalo had it, and it was kind of a boys' camp because he'd come down, bring 5 or 6 boys with him along with his son skiing, and then he'd come down in the summertime. And I've been standing here trying to think of what his name was, and I cannot think of it. But then there was, as you come into the this area, right off from the main road, there's a camp, and I can't remember what they called it, but a fellow by the name of Black owned it, and he had horses there, so if you wanted to go for a horseback ride or learn how to ride horses, you could go there and do it. But
Sprucelands, perhaps. Does that sound familiar?
It sounds like it, yeah.
That was the predecessor to Camp Allegany, which is there now.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
There's a kiosk on one of the buildings there that explain the history, and the old foundations are up on the back hill there. Very interesting. But now, as a kid, I remember my dad would take us, me and my 6 siblings, to the Bova, the dumps, you know. Yep. And do you recall, you know, those?
Oh, yeah. That was when all the garbage was collected and was taken up there and dumped. Some of it was burned and some of it was just dumped over the bank. And it was always a bunch of bears around. So in my younger days, with some of the other guys, we'd find some buffalo girls who never saw a bear, and we'd take them up there and show them the bears.
Very good. And I'm trying to think. There was an incinerator there, you said, at one time.
Some of the stuff was burned, but they didn't have anybody. There was an Indian fellow who worked up there for a while, and he would separate the bottles and the cans, and the rest would go in the incinerator, and the rest went over the bank.
Very good. The incinerator still exists over on the Quaker side of the park, but they remediated all that garbage, I think, in the 80s or something, and skimmed it down a few feet. Yeah. So, well, fascinating. I don't think we'll make it up to Big Basin there, but we got a little history on that for us.
Well, yeah, that started. I can't remember when. It must have been in the late 40s or early 40s. And they had a Poma lift, which was a device that you put between your legs, and it was like a big shock absorber. And when you started up, it would pull back, and then if you were too light, it would pick you right up off the ground. But that was a nice ski area, very small, but almost always was snow there, and it was well taken care of and well groomed, and it was used a lot. And I can't remember the year that was the last year they used it, but I know it hasn't been used in many, many years. And it was in a beautiful location, all native trees, beautiful, beautiful forest in there.
The old growth forest is back there.
Old growth forest, that's what I was trying to think of.
And that's off of Bay State Road.
Yes, it is.
A very short distance in. There's still the columns there for the lift are still in place.
Yeah.
A little rusty these days, but anyways, anything else you might want to add about the history of skiing or the park?
No, other than when, I guess I didn't mention it, Art Roscoe was, before we had packing machines to pack the hills with, he came up with an idea on a big empty electrical wire roll, and he fastened 1.25 inch slats across, and pipe as an axle, and small pipes that came out at the side and narrowed down, and you drag that thing to the top of the hill and then turn around and ski down with it. And if you weren't careful, it could run over you, but you had to do a snow plow going down, and that's what we used to pack the snow with at that time. And now they have automatic packers, and makes it easy. Pretty
fancy, very expensive snow groomers they drive around.
They are, and I guess they still have one that they use on the Art Roscoe cross-country trail.
They do, all throughout the cross-country ski trails, and they groom it for the snowmobiles as well. Are you familiar with the history a little bit of cross-country skiing in the park?
Yeah, people didn't like to do cross-country skiing because it had a little effort to it, but Art Roscoe kind of championed that. And some of those trails up on the summit were already there. They were hiking trails that the CCCs had cut, and he got a crew in there and cleaned them all up. And he championed the cross-country skiing, and now it's very well used now, and that's why it's called the Art Roscoe Ski Trail.
Very good. Well, Mr. Carr, fascinating history. It was a real pleasure interviewing you. I appreciate it. On behalf of the park patrons that will watch this, thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. Glad I could do it.
Okay.